Good evening and welcome to tonight's stream. I've got a lot of things on my mind that I need to get off my mind. And I was quite shocked. I saw this news item, of whatever you want to call it, this development of sorts, and just absolutely felt like I had to weigh in on it. I don't know. Um, generally people flock to this channel because they like all the Misfits, Sam Hain, Danzig content. We do a lot of punk content on the channel. We talk about the Ramones. We talk about the Pistols. We talk about a lot of things, a lot of different things in both, music, movies, media, philosophy, history, this, that, and the other. One thing we have not spoken about a lot on this channel, even though I've mentioned in passing that I happen to be a ginormous Sublime fan. I always have been. I have a very embarrassing tattoo of the sun that I'm not going to show right here on my chest. That's how much I love this band. I really do. Really, really do. Spent my formative teenage years listening to Sublime. It's very I don't even want to say what it's very ... of me in terms of describing who and what I am. But yeah, those were kind of like the bands, as much as I was into punk rock and, Misfits and this, that, and the other, on the other side of the coin, I love Sublime. I love how eclectic they were. Sublime introduced me to bands like the Bad Brains, and I guess I knew who the Descendants were, but I really got familiar with their music through the covers that Sublime would do. It's funny. A lot of Sublime's music, it's easy to say that Sublime covered a lot of songs, but that's not quite true. They did so much more than just cover, songs and bands that they really loved. They reinterpreted it. I guess that's what a cover is, right? No, it's just not the right word, though. It's just not the right vernacular for what Sublime did to that music. They fused it and, repurposed it. And, they're very influenced by, as much as they were influenced by the Bad Brains, they were, stuff like bands like Fishbone, you know what I mean? Who are also doing something very similar, 1 minute ska, the next minute heavy metal, the next minute funk, like just in a blender, and I guess that's what I love so much about Sublime is they also made these types of music more accessible for me, a prism, whatever. That's my own personal relationship with the band. I love the band for that. I love it's so funny how they're like the only punk jam band. They're a jam band, but they're also like a punk band all at the same time. You don't think of punk bands really jamming or freestyling or, this, that, and the other. And like, even a band like the Bad Brains, just in the sense of like them slowing things down and going to reggae. It's like Bradley Nowell. I said this before because we've done one other Sublime episode on this channel where we talked about, we read from this article in the Ringer where we just talked about the last days of Sublime. Very good article, very, very long episode. You can check that out if you want. It's somewhere on the channel. But the idea that like, it's almost like the ska up picking, whatever you want to call it, is the missing link between punk rock and reggae. That's what allows you to shift in the spectrum. And Bradley Nowell kind of cracked that code, and yeah, like I said, it's not like he was the first guy to really do it, because again, you had bands like Fishbone and the Bad Brains who were blending and combining genres. And 1 second Bad Brains are, ferociously spewing, House of Babylon or Attitude or Fearless Vampire Killers, and the next minute they're talking about I Love Ijah, Leaving This Babylon, this, that, and the other. So it's kind of interesting. It's all kind of interesting but again, and then it's funny, like in terms of the parallels, because we're going to be talking about parallels as well. The irony, I love these two bands, the Misfits and Sublime, and they have a lot in common with each other, or they have some stuff in common with each other. They have They both have this incredible, and the reason why I'm bringing up the Misfits in a show that really shouldn't be about Misfits is because, you know, the histories kind of run parallel in certain ways. You have you have two bands with just this great artistic sense, this great visual aspect to their music. The places where they come from have become like historic footnotes. You know, Long Beach, California is to Sublime in the way that Lodi, New Jersey is to the Misfits. You know, they both were around for a finite period of time. The Misfits were around for about 7 years. And, you know, they say Sublime started in 86, but really, I don't know. From what I've read and studied and learned about this band, I mean, they really started in 88. That's when the band really comes together. So they both were roughly around for the same period of time. They also hold one more distinction that's noteworthy, in that they both have secondary iterations of the band that divide fans, where, you know, the fans are split. There are some fans that are super stoked that the band is back. I say that in quotation marks if you're listening to this on the podcast via Spotify. The band is back and they're out playing shows and they're keeping the music alive, versus the purists who are like, no, the band was this thing, and when this thing left the band no longer existed. Which then brings me to, you know, the rules. And what are these rules? There's no actual rules, but it's like kind of like it's a philosophy, right? It's like a sort of an understanding of like what makes a band a band. And I think like what gives a band an identity that they go by the name of that band. And when does that change? At what point do things within that band alter in a way where you no longer can go by that name? In the case of the Misfits, Glenn Danzig left the band that he fronted, and Jerry and Doyle continued on without him and got a new singer. And most people would tell you, myself included, they never should have called themselves the Misfits. It's not really the Misfits. You need Glenn Danzig and Jerry only for it to be the Misfits. And by the same token, the heart and soul of Sublime was Bradley Nowell. You know, what contributions did Eric Wilson and Bud Gaugh have to Sublime? I don't know Sublime as well as I know the Misfits and their history and their inner workings. I've interviewed a lot of the former members of the Misfits and people in the periphery, and really just, you know, really people have called me an amateur historian of the Misfits. And I think it's an appropriate title. I really do feel like a historian. I really do feel like I've studied the history of that band and know them inside and out as well as one can as a fan in the age of the internet and the age of talking to people and interviewing people. I can't say the same for Sublime, but I've read a lot about Sublime, and but I don't know to what extent Eric Wilson and Bud Gaugh were the creative driving force in Sublime. I know Eric Wilson most certainly contributed writings. I'm pretty sure it was Eric who came up with his own bass parts. And I'm pretty sure Bud Gaugh came up with his own drum parts. I'm pretty sure that those guys jammed out those songs until those songs became those songs. And that's how that band kind of functioned. Even if Brad, you know, again, Brad's bringing all these different influences, bringing all these songs and incorporating, like doing these half original, half cover songs. Essentially, is what they are. And the mentality comes from, you know, a mentality that they have in Jamaica, with Jamaican and Caribbean music, dance hall and reggae and all these things. This idea of this thing that I'm going to sound like such a white boy with what I'm about to say. What's up, crazy white boy? Speaking of white boys, crazy white boy is saying, wow, I didn't think they could use the name. This idea of deridum. It's called deridum, and it's a colloquialism for rhythms, different rhythms, in the same way that with hip hop, you can have people can get a beat, you get a beat and you freestyle your own thing over that beat. You know what I'm saying? And it could be the same beat. And I feel like that's what that's the super unique, interesting thing that Brad brought musically, where, hey, what's up, Aaron? How are you? Where Brad is going like, I'm going to do, every day I love it just a little bit more. Like he's like doing a little Barrington Levy. And then it turns into his own song. And then he goes back into the Barrington Levy song. He did that. I mean, if you look at the songwriting credits on all these Sublime songs, you will see that there's partial songwriting credit from so many people, because that's, they borrowed. That's what, the idea of the boss DJ. We're DJs. We're picking up things that we like and we're imprinting ourselves onto these things that we like and repackaging it through our own arrangements and our own style, our own style-y, as they say out in the West Coast, and doing this thing, bringing our own flavor into it. You know what I mean? And that primarily is Brad, right? Bradley Nowell, who is the frontman, guitar player, lead singer, pretty much soul singer of the band. Now, the reason why I'm bringing that up is because, to go back again, we were talking about rules, criteria. What are the rules and criteria for what make a band a band? You have frontman, you have founding member, you have singer songwriter or just songwriter, and you have, I don't know, creative director, maybe. These are all elements that make a band by the given band name. Now, there's no there's no concrete. If your lead singer leaves, that doesn't mean you have to stop being said band. If one of your songwriters leaves, that doesn't necessarily have to mean that you have to being that band. It's very subjective. A lot of questions come up. How many songwriters are in the band? Who founded the band? Did the founding member, who's also the singer-songwriter, leave? You can't call that band the band anymore. That's not the band anymore. Glenn Danzig founded the Misfits, brought Jerry in, and they became the Misfits together with Manny. That was the core, the founding of the Misfits. Glenn wrote all the lyrics. Glenn wrote just about all the music, or most of the music. And Glenn leaves. You can't call that the Misfits anymore. You have to call it another name. And by the same token, if your singer, songwriter, frontman, vocalist, founding member dies of a heroin overdose tragically, you can't call yourself Sublime anymore. You can't do it. And now let's kind of like backtrack a little bit here just for a second, because I just want to sort of highlight what I remember happening. Well, I guess first let's pull this up. So this is from Sublime Wiki. Shout out to Sublime Wiki on Facebook. I'm going to share this real quick because they laid this out in such a nice little chart. And I mean, what am I going to sit here? You're going to see my comment and my link over here. Look, they have a nice little chart here. Sublime, what happened? 1986 to 1996, May 1996, Bradley Nowell passes away. August 1996, the band announces on K-Rock that they will no longer be using the name Sublime, as is appropriate, right? As is the right thing to do. In 2009, the impossible happens, and it's so surreal because think about that. From 96 to 2009 seems like such a long period of time. It's roughly 13 years, and it's been 14 years since Sublime with Rome has been around. Isn't that strange? Thank you for the skulls. That's right. Kind of like Guttermouth with no mark. There is no Guttermouth. I don't know Guttermouth enough. I do like Guttermouth. Can I borrow some ambition? But do not know Guttermouth well enough to weigh in on that. But yes, I suppose it would be. So it's kind of weird to think that Sublime with Rome has been around as long as the interim between when the original Sublime ended and the Sublime, a band calling themselves Sublime, played their first show. I remember this. I remember on MySpace, I think it was Bud Gaugh, said something's going down in Reno. You're going to shoot yourself in the foot if you miss this. You do not want to miss this. And, I was in college at the time and I was living in Chicago, and I legitimately considered flying out to Reno for 36 hours. I was looking at flights and everything, because I had the strangest inkling feeling that Eric Wilson and Bud Gaugh were going to attempt to play Sublime music under the name Sublime. Now at that time, remember, it was like a fucking desert, dude. Like, there are all these bands that are trying, and that's the other thing that I forgot to mention about running parallel between the Misfits and Sublime. The Misfits, essentially, Glenn Danzig with the Misfits, Jerry Only, a whole genre of music, horror punk, basically sprang from this one band. This one band created a whole subgenre, a whole subculture, and a whole scene, a whole thing, a whole aesthetic just from their band. And the same exact thing happened with Sublime out in California. You had all sorts of cookie cutter copycat bands. Pepper was one of them, I remember. You just have all these bands just trying to friggin' package that very original / derivative, because as we described what those guys would do with other people's songs, this very unique thing that Sublime did. Then everybody started trying to copy it, because this crazy thing happened. And in the way that, again, another parallel, here's this underground thing, Misfits underground, and all of a sudden Metallica starts wearing Misfit shirts, and their exposure just explodes. They're still a cult band. They're still an underground thing, but they're suddenly introduced to all these metalheads are suddenly introduced to this concept that is the Misfits. For Sublime, they end their first official studio album, like in a proper studio, having signed a record deal for which they were in $1 million of debt for, goes platinum 6 times. They break out, they burst out. They don't do what Dookie did, and they don't quite do what Nirvana did on that level, on that scale, but they explode. This very underground sort of thing explodes onto the mainstream, and suddenly everybody knows the song Santeria, and everybody knows all their music, What I Got, everything. It just becomes so, and of course it gets adopted by a lot of terrible, you got college frat, culture, just like all this, some of the worst people. So this Sublime, it's just so bad. It's hard to be a Sublime fan sometimes. It really is. It really, really is. You know what I'm saying? I want to, slightly stupid, I want to give them kind of a pass in the sense that you could say that they ripped off Sublime, but like, man, those kids were 15 and 16 and they knew Brad, and their first album as 15 and 16-year-olds were on Skunk Records, right? Like that, Brad played on one of their songs. Like they knew, Brad was like their mentor. I do not hold that against them. I don't think of them as like totally derivative. Like maybe they're derivative of Sublime, but like, again, it's like those dudes were heavily influenced in a kind of a really valid sort of way, in my opinion, comparatively speaking to some other ones, So I can't really, I can't really fault them for that. I'm not going to. But what's interesting is there's that parallel too. So they have this big friggin' hit album. I mean, it's the saddest story in the world. They're about to go to Europe, and it's funny. I was asking Jack Grisham from TSOL about it, because I knew that he was around the same scene. He was in the Joy Killer. He was supposed to be on tour with Sublime. He was telling me him and the Joy Killer were on a package tour with Sublime in Europe, and I believe No Use for a Name. They ended up selling Sublime's merch and sending it back to to Troy, at least as far as I understand, something like that. So really interesting that this band is about to explode. Everybody is going to know this band. They're going to be in every household you could imaginable, mainstream rock radio. And the lead singer has tragically passed away due to a heroin overdose. Crazy. And now, so again, like, as I was saying, you have these cookie cutters that are out there making derivative Sublime music. But the idea, like Bud and Eric have not, they did the Long Beach Dub All-Star thing, which is okay for what it is, but it's not Sublime. Like, it's not like the idea of like this fusion 3-piece, punk reggae ska trio is extinct. There's who's going to replace Brad? Nobody. They could have had now here's the thing. What is the right thing to have done? What could they have done? An alternative universe situation that really isn't really alternative, because they kind of did do this in 2009. They actually followed through with it. What could they have done right after Brad had died? They could have done in 2009, or what they'd done in 2009, they could have done right after Brad died. However, like the shock and devastating loss of losing not only your best friend, but the front man and sort of like the man behind like all the stuff. And, he has since been canonized as, a saint, a patron saint, just in the same way as Joey Ramone and, Sid Vicious and all these people who tragically died too young, John Lennon. Bradley Nowell sits up there with all of them, especially in the realm of like, Sublime fans. It's like this, can do no wrong, saintly guy. But the reality was, Bradley had problems. He had drug addiction problems, and he ultimately ended himself before his band could take off. And it's like, you have to think again, and all this is trying to like contextualize and understand what happens in 2009 with Sublime, with Sublime, quote unquote, playing a show with this new guy, Rome. It's like your big break happens, you're selling millions of albums, and you literally can't tour. You literally can't tour because your friend and bandmate is gone, and you have to retire the name, and you can never do what you set out to do and take over the world. I mean, how frustrating that must be to let that stew and fester for years and years and years. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere comes this kid, Rome, who grew up on your music and kind of vaguely has like a Bradley vibe energy to him, has a really great, you have a great chemistry with him. And suddenly you're thinking in your head, man, we can be Sublime again. Let's do it. It's like Bradley's never coming back. Like, we're here. Like, there are bands out there like Badfish, who I've seen many times. Badfish, I used to be on their street team. In fact, when I was in college, Badfish is one of the best Sublime cover bands, endorsed by Bud Gaugh as well, drummer of Sublime. It's like Bud and Eric are like shit. Here's a cover band making over $1.5 million annually touring on our music. Why can't we do that? And, obviously, like, again, with the Misfits, like with any of these situations, why do people continue after the element that makes them what they are is gone? Why do they continue? They continue because it's easier to continue with an established brand that's going to command a higher guarantee and more money and get you a record deal and get your foot through the door than it is to start from scratch. And those guys gave it good, hard college tries. They did. They did so many things before they decided to reform as Sublime. After the Long Beach the Long Beach Dub All-Stars was the Long Beach Short Bus, which featured Eric and Ross, who's kind of like the the Diet Bradley in Long Beach Dub All Stars. And you know, and there was this other guy, Opie who drew The Sun. He was also a singer. And Tim Wu and Field Marshal Goodman, who is also a Sublime drummer as well. In fact, it's actually Marshall who kind of co-wrote and played drums on every single 40 Ounce to Freedom track that wasn't from Ja Won't Pay the Bills. So Bud never wasn't around for the recording of 40 Ounce to Freedom. He was in rehab, and he kind of got turned on to Jesus or something. He was off doing his thing. And they brought in Marshall Goodman to record and play as, be a part of Sublime. Point being, what was my point with that? I don't remember what it was, what I was trying to get out. The point being is that they did a lot of things together. They did a lot of things separately in trying to move on. They did the Long Beach Short Bus. Ross and Eric did Long Beach Short Bus, and Bud, he was in a band called Eyes Adrift, which is an interesting supergroup, noteworthy for the fact that it had Kirst from Nirvana and Kurt from the Meat Puppets. 3 bands that were all 3 pieces that all had mainstream success in the 90s, and all had lost a member. In the case of Nirvana and Sublime, the front man, through self-inflicted trauma. Nonetheless, very interesting. I don't know how Kurt died. Not Kurt. Sorry, the other guy. Isn't there another guy from the Meat Puppets who passed away? Am I making that up? Maybe I'm making that up. I don't think I am. So, point being, they tried to do a lot of things. Then there was Volcano, which had Miguel, Michael Happopolt, right, on guitar up front. That they did one album called Volcano as a group. Eric had a band called Little Wing where he was drumming. He was a drummer for a while. Bud started a band with his wife at the time called Delmar, and there was also the Mount Aaron and the Rat Finks or something. There's also Fill in the Blanks. That was another band that Bud was doing. They're doing a lot of stuff. And then they meet this guy, Rome. Eric meets Rome and starts covering Sublime songs with him in a studio. And they start jamming, and it feels right. And they decide, let's play a show as Sublime, which was absolutely, sacrilege. It was. But at the time, it was exciting because so desperately did I want to hear the people, who were a part of Sublime. I wanted them to be playing Sublime music in some sort of Sublime project. I wanted there to be some sort of legitimate heir to the Sublime throne, doing something that was Sublime. Now, I just want to take a brief moment to a sidebar for a minute to talk about Jacob Nowell. And the reason why I even bring him up, and not for the reasons you're thinking, Jacob Nowell has to contend with this very sort of strange, history. He has to, he never really knew his dad. He knew his dad when he was a baby. He doesn't remember his father, and yet almost foisted upon him in a variety of ways. And again, I don't know where he is mentally or what he is with this stuff today. But just this idea that there's so many people that I've seen this through the internet, just like so many people who are like, you need to replace your father in your father's band. Like, that's such a weird thing to to put on a guy who has his own musical sensibilities, his own musical taste. And what's funny about Jake? He's so utterly original. Here's the thing. He's so utterly original in what he does, and yet somehow manages to genuinely distill his father's sound. He's obviously his father. He got to know his father through his father's music, right? He's talked about how Sublime was always on in my house. So he knows his father through his father's music. He learned how to play guitar. He's so clearly influenced by his father without trying to be. if ever there was a guy who was so set up to be like, yeah, dude, I'm just going to play my dad's music and blah, 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 and do it, like, it would be a guy like Jake. And instead, he strikes out with it. He strikes out on his own with his own original music, his own original sound. So what's funny is that itch I was referring to about like the natural successor to Sublime, it eventually came in the form of Jake without Jake calling himself Sublime, which would be so cringeworthy. It would be, yes, kind of like Sean Lennon, a little bit. Aaron, a little bit, kind of like Sean Lennon. Yep. It would be so cringeworthy for like, I feel like it'd be so cringe for like Bud and Eric to like legitimately take Jake out. I'm sure it's been entertained or floated by someone somewhere. I remember a podcast with Todd Zulkins, where he's like trying to pitch Jake live on the air about like, hey, you should step in and sing for your father, like be the front man of your father's band. And I don't know if it made him uncomfortable. It seemed like it made him really uncomfortable. I felt uncomfortable. I felt cringy for Jake. Like, I felt bad. I legitimately had some serious codependent feelings of like, wow, way to fucking input, like talk about like imprinting something on someone who's a completely different individual with different like likes and ideas and tastes, that kind of thing. It just kind of bummed me out to hear him say that, but the irony and the reason why I'm bringing up Jake at all is because, as it turns out, he literally, like, when you listen to Law, man, like that early Law stuff that he did, Mild Lawtism, I mean, they sound so like, they sound super fresh. They have a Sublime vibe to the songs, but not like intending. You could so tell like they're not trying hard in the best way possible. It's like, hey, we're like, some of our sound is clearly influenced by Sublime, but we're so not even like making it a thing. It's just like, it just happens to, hey, I'm the son of the fucking guy. My voice sounds like the fucking guy. It sounds just like his dad. And now, man, I've followed Jake and Law and all that stuff, and I just love where he's going musically. I think he's awesome. I saw him covering Hey Ya by fucking Outkast. I thought it was so rad. It was just so great. Go check it out. We actually watched it on the channel. He's got like a drum machine. He's just doing Hey Ya, and he's doing the same thing that his father, like all that riffing and skanking and this, that, and the other, and freestyling. Like, he just does it, but it doesn't feel fake or forced like all these other cookie cutter wannabe bands. He just is doing it because it's in his DNA to fucking do it. But he's not going around and be like, hey, I'm Sublime Jr. Like, he's legitimately just doing the coolest thing ever. And I'm super stoked for that guy. But in 2009, that hadn't come yet. So it's like there's this big void. And Bud and Eric decide, hey, let's fill it. Let's fucking fill it. Let's fill it with this guy, Rome. Now, about Rome for a minute. I just want to put this on Front Street here. I got no problem with Rome musically, okay? I like Rome. I like his singing. I think he's a good guitar player. I think he's a good songwriter. I think that he's capable of channeling that Sublime energy in his own kind of way with Eric. I've got no problem on that level. I got no problem with Sublime with Rome. The band, Eric, Bud, and Rome, great band, great trio, great energy, awesome. Where things become problematic, what really makes it problematic, what really fucks everything up, is them calling themselves Sublime or Sublime with Rome. Now, initially, when they called themselves Sublime with no Rome afterwards, they were hit with a lawsuit or an injunction or something by the Nowell family. Because as it turns out, motherfucking Bradley had, behind the scenes, like trademarked the name or something. The family had the legal right to the name. And they put in a case like, hey, and then they eventually reached the settlement. And this is where money, again, when you think about like Why is it that what prevents two countries from attacking each other? Fucking McDonald's, man. Like when there's money to be made, everybody's chill. And the reality is they licensed the name from the Nowells. I don't remember what the exact terms were, but I believe they were getting 6 figures a year for the leasing of that name. Everybody's happy. At least all affirmation parties are happy. The fans are not happy. To the fans, it's kind of a travesty. Now, I remember when they were coming around to play, and I almost went to go see them when Bud was still in the band. And I'll be honest, I regretfully wish that I had. Like, I wish I did it. I wish I didn't sit it out. I was kind of they were playing with 311, and I was like, I like 311 too, you know? Yeah, that's just the white boy in me. You know, just the it's just such a fucking, like, I can't describe it, whatever. It's just stereotypes, man. Stereotypes. So it's like they were playing with 311. I was like, that's a good package, man. I'll go see that out. So they're playing in Long Beach, New York, you know, on Long Island. And I just missed it. I didn't end up going. I was like, I don't know if I want this. I don't know if I want to see it. I was a little ambivalent. And then right after that, Bud leaves the band. So this is like December 2011. So that was probably summer 2011. And then December 2011, Bud quits. And he cited many reasons as to why. He was replaced by Josh Freese, one of the greatest session professional drummers of all time. Josh Freese. Josh is indeed one talented dude. This guy has played with everybody. I can't even list all of the people. I mean, I'll try. Fucking Foo Fighters, Guns N' Roses, Perfect Circle, Sublime with Rome, fucking 9 Inch Nails, Devo. I mean, the guy he's just played with everybody you could imagine. He's just one of those drummers, man. He was in the was he in the Vandals? No, he wasn't in the Vandals. He was in a punk band too. Right, Replacements. He's in the Replacements. You know, he just has drummed in a lot of fucking bands, right? He replaces Bud, and suddenly this problematic thing becomes even more problematic. But before we get there, what could they have done? Because like I said, I was right. He was in the Vandals. Yes, I knew that. What could Bud and Eric have done? Now, mind you, again, let me just reiterate here. Two guys who had a multi-platinum selling record who never got to fucking taste the success. They never got to tour their own music. They never got to do it. They did it a little bit. They played a couple of covers played a couple of Sublime songs in Long Beach Dub All-Stars. When I went to go see the Long Beach Short Bus, they did 3 Sublime songs. I got to meet Eric. That was pretty cool. That was 2005 at the Red Lion in the West Village, New York. But they never got to really be Sublime on any kind of major scale. And now it had been some 14-ish years, and there was a whole new group of people, the whole new generation of fans discovering Sublime. So the motivation to play out as Sublime, like comparatively to the Misfits, who are like, you know, Jerry's like, this Christ the Conqueror thing is not working out. It's better to call myself. I want to be the Misfits. Although at the same time, also, again, another example of like, the Misfits are huge and we're no longer a band. It's like, I want to experience that. And I put in all the hours and the hard work and the time and effort when I was a youngster, when I was a Ute in 83. And now I want to reap that reward in 95. And him and Doyle most certainly did. And they got paid, you know, and, you know, again, good for them. But why not call yourself another name? Well, because your guarantees aren't going to be as good, but whatever. There's an air of legitimacy that you get, an air of respect from the fan base when you change your name. If you change your name, you have to work twice as hard, but you need to but if you change your name and you pull it off, you know, look no further than fucking Joy Division. We've talked about this topic a lot, like this topic of changing personnel and determining how you justify calling yourself or not calling yourself that band name. In the case of Joy Division, Ian Curtis did what he did, and the rest of the members of Joy Division were like, we will continue on as a band, but we are no longer Joy Division. We are now New Order. And it made a lot of sense. Another fantastic example of this is the Minutemen, D. Boone, Mike Watt. Speaking of Sublime influences, Mike Watt and the Minutemen. D. Boone dies in December 85, and the band is over. And then all of a sudden, the bass player and the drummer, George is the drummer, they get approached by this uber huge Minuteman fan who's basically trying to get them to play again as a three-piece. And they're never going to call themselves the Minutemen again because the Minutemen included D. Boone, and D. Boone is dead. So what do you call yourself? Firehose. That's right. They called themselves Firehose. I'm actually looking them up real quick. Yeah, Ed Crawford was the guy who took over. It was George Hurley with Mike Watt. It was after the accidental death of D. Boone brought an end to Watt and Hurley's previous band, the Minutemen. Crawford, a then 21-year-old Ohio State student and Minuteman fan, was invited up onto the roof of Camper von Beethoven's van in Columbus, Ohio. The members of Camper told Crawford a false rumor that Watt and Hurley were auditioning guitars for the band. Crawford, having found Watt's phone number in the phone book, called him up and expressed his desire to come out to California to play with them. Still mourning the loss of his best friend Boone, he loved this man so much. They never changed the strings on his guitar. The blood, D. Boone's blood, is still rusted onto the guitar strings from the night of his last show when he died in the car accident. Watt initially was not interested and had lost much of his desire to play music. However, Crawford's persistence eventually paid off when he showed up unannounced in San Pedro and asked Watt for the chance to come over and play for him. Watt eventually agreed, and the two met with Crawford auditioning for Watt by playing him The Who's I'm One, as well as a few Minutemen songs. Impressed with Crawford's passion and enthusiasm, Watt and Hurley agreed to give the inexperienced quote-unquote kid from Ohio a shot, and the band was formed. Crawford quickly relocated to San Pedro, where he became known as Ed F-R-O-M, from Ohio. Ed from Ohio, and spent 9 months sleeping under a desk in Watt's one-bedroom apartment. The name of the band was taken from a short film of Bob Dylan doing Subterranean Homesick Blues. So there you have it. And they put out on SST Records, they put out a bunch of records. They did 5 records in total between the years of 1986 and 1993. And what's interesting, what's really interesting is they basically, are they the Minutemen? No. Does it spring from the foundation? Yes. I've seen this documentary. It's called We Jam Econo about the Minutemen. It's fucking great documentary. Yes. Agreed. So the point being is that Firehose was never going to be the Minutemen. They couldn't be the Minutemen without D. Boone. But they were able to take the Minutemen heart and spirit and energy and form something new on top of it. And they called themselves Firehose. So you have New Order and Firehose, 2 prime examples of bands. And there are many more that are not coming to my mind. Now you have other examples where Black Sabbath continues to be Black Sabbath after Ozzy, whether you like it or not. Should they have changed their name? Probably, but they didn't. And Heaven and Hell and Mob Rules are 2 legitimate Black Sabbath albums, right? Eventually, when Ozzy did come back into Black Sabbath during reunion years much later, the guys in Heaven and Hell did reform. Sorry, the guys in the Dio Sabbath did reform, but they called themselves Heaven and Hell, and it made a lot of sense, and it sort of really legitimized what it was they were doing. The Misfits, had they decided to not use the name, could have called themselves the Resurrected. They could have called themselves Dead Kings Rise. They toyed with the idea of calling themselves Them, which, by the way, them is THE and then M, which is where you would search for them in a record store if you were looking for the Misfits. Get it? Them, the Misfits. So, that would have worked. Just them Misfits. I mean, it completes itself. How do you find a way to be the thing? In the case of Sublime with Rome, I've always said to myself, what's a good band name for Sublime with Rome? Secondhand Smoke. They should have gone out as Secondhand Smoke. They could have gone and called themselves Secondhand Smoke. In any case, Bud leaves he admits in interviews, he says there's a piece of footage of him. You see how unhappy they are together at some K-Rock thing, and it's the final time that they're all going to be together. And, he cites a bunch of reasons that, they have a manager named Frankie Cheese that comes out to play songs with them, and he doesn't, something that Bud is against. And, backstage passes being given out to groupies, Rome and Frankie Cheese's groupies and stuff. Is his name Frankie Cheese? Whatever, the manager guy. The manager of Sublime with Rome, all this different stuff. And Bud realized, like, this doesn't feel right. They put out an album called Yours Truly. And apart from, does it sound like Bradley exactly? No, but the music is great. And there are certain songs on Yours Truly. I don't care what anybody says. There are certain songs on Yours Truly that absolutely feel like the natural progression of what Sublime would be recording in the year 2009 or 2011 or whatever, had they not dissolved because of Bradley's death. It was produced by Paul Leary. So you have a lot of the personnel that played on that Sublime self-titled album has now made this album Yours Truly. It's a great album. What's the biggest problem with it? It's called Sublime with Rome. Why not use the name Secondhand Smoke? Call yourself Secondhand Smoke. Perfect name for a Sublime derivative band, for a band that's just like Firehose, man. Just fucking Secondhand Smoke. That's what they could have done. So from 2017 to then from 2012 to 2017, they released another album with Josh Freese. K-Rock calls him a hack. I don't know anything about this. This is a Sublime wiki. And I asked on the side, like, why? I don't know why Josh Freese ended up leaving Sublime with Rome, but according to this timeline here, Josh leaves the band abruptly and is replaced by a guy named Carlos from the Tribal Seeds. They put out another record. So there's 3 records out now. By 2017, 2018, there's 3 records out, and now they're working on their 4th record, which is due to come out very, very soon. Maybe they actually made that 4th record. How many records has Sublime with Rome made? Let's just double check that real quick. Let's see what is said. Bud says, by the way, in hindsight, I would not have used the name. I did not want to in the first place. I was talked into it, and I would like to apologize to certain people and fans for trying to justify it or talk them into it as well. He says when asked about how it was playing Sublime songs again, it was really good for the first few months. After that, it just felt wrong, not playing the songs, but playing them with the name Sublime without Brad. And then when asked if he saw the band reuniting in the future, Gaugh replied, "No, I'm done with SWR. I would be into playing music with Eric Wilson, however." So quite clearly, Eric's, he's like, I'm going to continue on as, doing Sublime with Rome. But, that the issue here, the acrimony had to do with Rome and not as much Eric, maybe. I mean, who knows? Maybe Eric is like an incredibly like passive kind of guy, in relation to all this stuff. So yeah, they put out 3 albums. Sirens and Blessings are the 2 albums that came after it with Josh Freese and the other guy, Carlos. And they are just such a, I don't know. I honestly, I've listened to them each once when they came out, and I didn't even give them a second thought after that. I really should go back and just listen to the whole discography and just give it another appraisal. I'm sure I'll find stuff that I like. I like Eric Wilson as a musician. I like Rome as a musician. I do think, however, one thing I did remember, and I'm not talking about Yours Truly, I'm talking about after that, I really got the feeling that they were trying, it's like they were trying to chase the dragon. They were trying to write Sublime music. And that's kind of cringe a little bit. It's kind of like, you're going to do your thing, but don't try and emulate the brain of a dead rock star that was your friend. But again, Sirens as a album by a band called Secondhand Smoke, I got no problem with that. Blessings, same thing. It's just this name, because what is ultimately, when you name something, when you give something the same name as something else, and it's not the same thing, you invite comparison. And that's what all these bands do. That's what Jerry Only did. That's what Eric Wilson has done. Funny how it's the bass players. Another parallel there. It's like you invite people to weigh in and compare and appraise your situation. It's nobody's fucking business if Eric wants to go out and play songs as Sublime, whether we like it or not. It's nobody's fucking business but Eric Wilson's, right? And clearly Eric Wilson is all about playing Sublime with Rome, and that's just what it is. So this guy Carlos replaces them, and then right, TSOL is another example of a band, and we've talked a little bit about that history, and I mean, by the end things had run so well. It's funny actually, because I guess TSOL has that same thing in common with Sublime with Rome now, because by the end of TSOL, that initial run of whatever you would consider the band or the continuation of the band, whether you think it's the band or not, by the end of that, there were no original members left. All the original members were gone out of TSOL. You had 4 completely different people who were not there from the founding of the band or writers in the band who became and owned the trademark to TSOL. It's mind-boggling, absolutely mind-boggling. So to continue on, Carlos abruptly leaves, and then he's replaced by this new guy, Jason. And now that brings us up to present day, where Sublime with Rome releases this statement, and it is just such a bananas. It's so bananas. This is what they say. Dear fans, while out on a summer tour, our bassist, Eric Wilson, and I love how it's like our bassist. It's like Eric Wilson is the fucking one guy who was in Sublime, okay? He's kind of he's the band. Eric Wilson unfortunately encountered a significant shoulder injury that required immediate surgery. We want you to know that our commitment to our fans remains as strong as ever, and we are fully dedicated to delivering our best performances until Eric is back in full health. During this challenging period, we find ourselves incredibly fortunate to have 2 remarkable talents to step in and handle bass duties. One is Stu Brooks, known for his work with Danny Elfman and Dub Trio, and the very fucking awesome, fucking amazing bass player, Tony Kanal from No Doubt. Their support allows us to continue sharing the music that you love. Our hearts go out to Eric as he embarks on his path to a swift recovery. We can't wait to reunite with all of you on the road, doing what we love and sharing the music. With sincere appreciation, Sublime with Rome. So it's like, it sounds like it's somebody who's not Eric talking about Eric. Why is this not coming from Eric? Or why is Eric not at the forefront of this? Because it's like, there's no original members in the band. There's a band calling themselves Sublime with Rome, and there's not a single person who was there that was at the fucking start of the band Sublime. You couldn't call yourself Sublime with Rome even when you had fucking Bud and Eric in the band. Now you're calling yourself Sublime with Rome and there's nobody in the band? What the fuck is this bullshit? This is bullshit, man. Like I said, I can get behind Rome musically and them playing music and them playing Sublime music. And I never had a problem with them playing Sublime music. I had a huge problem with them calling themselves Sublime with Rome. This invites comparison. And that's how you get all of these debates and this polarization. But it's such a strange note. the way that Eric is phrased. And then this Tony Kanal leaves me super conflicted too, because Tony knew Sublime. Tony used to play shows with Sublime, you know, like he is someone, he brings an air of old school legitimacy. How do I phrase this? Just because he's playing bass does not A, make it Sublime with Rome or make it Sublime, but B, it's just kind of like, it's confusing. It's like a confusing, conflicting thing. So it's like, oh, well, he's from No Doubt, and No Doubt used to play with Sublime, and like Tony's awesome and he'll do a great job. But it's like, at the same time, it's like, it'd be cool if Tony was in the band with Eric and Rome, and maybe they called themselves something else. And I know Tony's not really doing nothing. Yeah, they were doing Dream Car when Gwen was on her solo thing, but yeah, they had Davey Havoc from AFI as the front man. It's like Son of Sam, but with friggin' that's really funny. It's like Son of Sam, but with No Doubt instead. Isn't that interesting? So the point is that even having Tony Kanal in the band, it doesn't make it okay, even though Tony Kanal is super friggin' cool and an awesome dude. And, you know, on some level, maybe it's also a PR move. It's like saying, hey, look at this old school dude. He is cool with what's happening right now. And, you know, we're happy to help them move forward. Ultimately, none of this is okay. This is stupid. This is, as I said in the title, this is stupid for all the reasons I mentioned before. You can't call yourself Sublime with Rome anymore. And here's the thing. Any other band could probably legitimately say, hey, like, we book these shows, we can't break these contracts, people are depending on us, you know, there's a whole road crew that has to work and eat, the show must go on. And, you know, 98% of the time, getting someone to fill in, I mean, there are some bands like the Stranglers, for instance, before the drummer died. The drummer was super old. He stopped touring with the band. He was a ceremony. He was still a member of the band, but he was not on the road with them anymore, you know? So it's like there is a legitimate, like there's a legitimate, like, so there's a legitimacy to wanting to go out and meet your obligations contractually, as well as, you know, not disappoint the fans. But in your particular case, Sublime with Rome, you can't do that. You are not afforded that luxury because you only had one member from the original band in the band. You can't call yourself Sublime. You can't. You can't call yourself Sublime with Rome. You got to call yourself something else. You just gotta. And it's just a shame. Think about how all of this goes away with a name change like Secondhand Smoke. Suddenly, yes, there'll still be comparisons to Sublime, but nobody is scrutinizing. Nobody is staring it down as some sort of injustice to a dead man's memory. And, you know, I'm kind of the belief too of like, it's like, dude, you know, you did this to yourself, Brad, and now you left these guys up Schitt's Creek without a paddle. Like, they deserve the right to go out and go out and play their music, even if it's not as the name Sublime. Like that motivation is pure to me, no matter whether they did something right or wrong using that name. It was a pure motivation. So ultimately now they are going to go out and they're just going to go out with Rome. Why not call yourselves? I guess because they have tickets and sales and contracts and stuff. That's what it really is. That's what this comes down to. They probably signed contracts and they can't, it would be too costly. It's easier for them to just play out the obligations. And that's how this is being framed. Eric is not permanently gone, at least not that we know of. And that's how they're choosing to sort of frame it, as like, you know, we're just filling in, you know, the Beatles did it. The Beatles did it with Jimmy Nicol. When Ringo had a surgery on his mouth, he had to get his tonsils out. you know, people, it does happen. It does happen. You don't want to balk at your obligations, but at the same time, on some level, it's almost fraud to go out and call yourself Sublime with Rome and not even have fucking Eric Wilson playing with you live. And I mean, that's ultimately where it leaves us right now. So Eric is out of commission for a while. They got this new drummer, and they got 2 new guys to handle bass duties. And that's it. And that's it. If they play together, they're going to sound like Sublime. Yeah. I mean, to an extent, it's a sticky situation. And you know what else is sticky? Friggin' Riot stickers, the sponsor of the Frumess channel. You can get 1,000 stickers for $79. These stickers are printed on vinyl, and they have a UV coating that protects them from the sun. And if you go to the link in the description, you can't find this link anywhere else. You can get 1,000 stickers for $79. Okay. You go to riotstickers.com/Frumess, FRUMESS. That's what you do. That's how you do it. riotstickers.com/Frumess to get this incredible deal. Let's listen to the theme song from the Less Than Jake guy, and we will wrap up the show.
We make stickers, banners, and buttons too, posters and promo cards. There's nothing we can't print for you. From stage backdrops to bass drum heads, we can print on shirts, we can print on hats, we can print on pants. Cheap prices and high quality, quick turnaround times and free shipping. We also offer free artwork support, great customer service, and so much more. RiotStickers.com, Riot Stickers, we are the bomb. RiotStickers.com, Riot Stickers, we are the bomb. RiotStickers.com, Riot Stickers, we are the bomb. RiotStickers.com, Riot Stickers, we are the bomb.
And we are back. So, yes, thank you for the skulls. Please make sure to leave some skulls in the comments or in the live chat if you have not done already, because we need skulls, man. We need skulls to hang on our wall. You know, yeah, you should buy some stickers, right? Stickers could always use more customers. So make sure to use the Frumess deal. Get 1,000 stickers for $79. You could print up a sticker that says it's wrong for Rome Ramirez to go out as Sublime with Rome without Eric Wilson. I can't believe I'm even saying that, because that's also a cop out too, man. Like, geez, that's also a cop out too, man. They should just use a new name. But listen, everybody's making money, and like I said, when you're making money, it's okay to be funny. When you're making money, everything's honey. That's the rhyme. That's the truth, man. Everybody's stoked because money's being made. The Nowell family, all that money's probably going to Bradley's house. Bradley's house is a nonprofit for musicians that suffer from opioid addiction. Yeah, everybody found their happy medium, their equilibrium, and you know, there's no more injunctions or fighting now. That it was really just about getting paid. The thing that Sublime Wiki put at the bottom here, you know, and again, this is some of that venerating of Brad as like a saint, a martyr, or whatever. Sublime returned in 2009 without its soul singer, songwriter, and composer. You can't say soul singer. He wasn't the sole songwriter and composer. Bradley had help. He had a lot of help. The return of Sublime without Bradley Nowell was an action directly against the dead man's wishes. We are now left with a true Frankenstein monster. Rest in peace, Brad. You know, the other thing too is the other missing pieces. You know, there is another member of Sublime we have not acknowledged at this point, and that is Miguel. Miguel in the studio was the fourth member of Sublime. He also was the fourth member of Sublime Live, playing a second guitar. And boy, did he fill out the sound in the best way imaginable. There's a great version of DJs with Kelly Vargas on drums and Miguel on second guitar, and he just adds so much to the sound. This is like a pre-heroin Brad, or at least Brad just started tying on. So he's, you know, not what he would become in 93 and 94. He's still kind of with it. And, you know, there's the whole mythology about how he wanted to be a tortured artist by taking heroin and thought it would make him more creative. And, you know, the reality is that's also kind of a cop out too. I mean, yes, he was an addict, and yes, he had addiction issues, but he also kind of like, it's like he forced himself into this box because he wanted to be this tortured artist. I kind of, you know, when I was younger, I sort of romantically like looked at that, upon that as tragedy, but as an adult, I see it differently, man. I just don't see it the same. I don't see it in the same exact kind of way that I once did. But you had Miguel as this fourth member. Now there's some alternate universe where Miguel steps into Bradley's role either before Rome Ramirez or the way he did with Volcano with Bud as Mike Stand, or after Rome. And, you know, I think Miguel is very upset and does not endorse or co-sign or acknowledge, you know, Sublime with Rome much, if at all. He even wrote that song, the last ska song, where he kind of disses Sublime with Rome. And he said they even tried to do the Band Without You, something like that. It's like a letter to Bradley. There's some alternate worlds where Mike comes in and maybe he's not the front man, maybe it's still Rome, but he just sort of fills out the sound on the stage. And it's the three of them. It's Bud, Mike, and Eric with Rome, and they call themselves Secondhand Smoke. And they're just, I mean, that's me like fan fictioning the whole situation. But just imagine some alternate reality where that happened and how awesome it would be. It would just be great. And then they go in and, you know, Miguel, he engineer and produces a new record utilizing a lot of the techniques they did with Brad. And again, as a different entity called Secondhand Smoke, everybody knows, okay, you're not calling yourself Sublime, respect. But if you want to see the closest thing to Sublime, go see Secondhand Smoke. It makes sense. It makes so much sense. And, you know, I like that, Aaron. Aaron says, take out orange chicken, almost as good as Skulls. That's kind of true. It's kind of true. So it's, you know, coulda, woulda, shoulda, didn't. But ultimately, this is just terrible. And it's interesting to me that they're playing with Slightly Stupid, who probably like it because it's good for ticket sales. That, you know, even Slightly Stupid is eating off the Sublime name. It's kind of a bummer, actually. How do these people justify? I know Troy and Jim Nowell and the like are cool with this because they're getting paid. They're making money. But like, what about, you know, what about everybody? Like, I don't know. It just doesn't work, man. It just doesn't fucking work. It's just a bummer. It's a real bummer. Like I wonder in my head, I'm like, what do the Ziggin guys think about this? What does Miguel think about this? What do some of the Long Beach Dub All-Star guys? You know, what did Jake think about this? I do know there was some sort of tension between Jake and Rome at one point, I think, something like that, because Rome was walking around saying that he's the singer of Sublime, not singer of Sublime with Rome, when Jake was like a teenager, no less. So I don't know. At the end of the day, I wish Eric a full recovery. I hope he does return to the band Sublime with Rome, because it's not, I mean, you couldn't use the name Sublime before. You really can't use the name Sublime when there's not a single original member in the band, much like TSOL. you know, at that time. And what happened with TSOL? The original guys, they came back and they fought. And you know what was ironic is that the lead singer, the second lead singer, was Jack's brother-in-law of all people. What a weird, interesting history. His own brother-in-law takes over singing in his band and then eventually owns the trademark. I mean, it's just, you know, truth is stranger than fiction sometimes. You couldn't write something that twisted. And I guess it's the same with Sublime with Rome to an extent. Now, you know, I was on the fence about seeing them. Now, would I ever go to see them? Like, I don't think ever. I mean, I guess maybe if I wanted to hear Sublime song set, like whatever. Okay, fine. Like if I had to choose between Badfish and Sublime with Rome, I guess maybe I would see Sublime with Rome. Like I said, I don't mind Rome singing and playing and all that. I just hate that they call themselves Sublime. And you know, it's amazing how there are just so many fans that rush to their defense. They're keeping the music alive. It's not the same band. It's like there's all this like legitimacy that's all about like a legitimacy of some kind. I don't know. So where do you stand on this issue? What do you think is going to happen? Do you think Eric Wilson will be back? I imagine he has to come back. How could they imagine if Eric Wilson permanently sat out of Sublime with Rome and suddenly this guy, Rome Ramirez, is in fucking control of Sublime with Rome? It's so fucking bizarre, dude. Why call yourself that? It just doesn't fucking work. It does not work. I bet there's so much more to the backstory that Bud Gaugh is not, you know, telling people like about what happened and how that all came to be. And it's a weird thing with Eric too, because like Eric is quite clearly, you know, he seems to be, you know, the one that is driving. He's still driving all of this. He's the link from the past and the future, or he's the link from the past to the present. I mean, it's not all Rome here. You can't put all the blame on Rome. But like I said before, and I'll close with this, I understand the obligation to wanting to meet your obligations for contracts and touring, and people are depending for you to eat. But you are literally peddling a false statement by calling yourself Sublime with Rome without having an original member. Bottom line. And I guess that's all I got. That's all I got tonight. So with that, I'm going to bid you adieu. What did you think? Do you like this? Do you want to see more Sublime shows? Should we talk more about Sublime? Was this enough Sublime? Do we want to do more Sublime? Is there more to explore? I don't know. I guess this kind of proves that we can have a long form conversation about Sublime. I wasn't sure if we could, but at the same time, I also feel like we kind of said everything that needed to be said and that needed to say. That was interesting. Aaron says Eric will come back. I mean, he has to. I feel like someone could sue them for false advertising. I mean, it's just crazy to me. It's so crazy. Like I said, look, subscribe, leave a comment, leave me your skull in the live comment, in the live chat, as well as the comments down below. We'll see you next time. Peace, hair grease, you know all the rest. Bada bing, bada boom. Lord have this grilled cheese.